Hello everyone, welcome to Excel with Isaac series, and in this video I'll be taking you through the Vlookup function, which is one of the most common Excel functions out there. Now what we'll be looking at is why do we need Vlookup, and then I'll also take you through the breakdown of the Vlookup function. In here we have the four main elements that make up the function, which is the lookup value, the table array, the column index num, and the range lookup that gives you two options. Then after we are done with that, I'll take you through some practice examples. This is to solidify your understanding of VLOOKUP and give you working knowledge of how to apply VLOOKUP. And when we are done with that, we'll look at the main limitation of what the VLOOKUP function is and how we can bypass it. And then we'll look at instances where you've done everything that you're supposed to do as far as the function is concerned. However, your lookup is not returning the results that you want it to. And then after that, I'll leave you with a bonus example to try your hands on. So with that, let's begin. So why do we need VLOOKUP? Imagine I needed the region, age, and scorecard for the names that I have here. And I needed to find them from a reference data set, which is this. If I didn't have understanding of VLOOKUP, what I'll likely do is put a filter on this data set and then manually come and copy the region for George, come and paste it here, and do the same for the age and the scorecard. Now, if you have just two names to look out for, that's fine. However, imagine if you had about 100 names and you had to do this over and over and over again. That would take so much time to be able to complete. And that's where VLOOKUP comes in. VLOOKUP is able to take data from your reference data set and then transfer it to your main data set. Now, in order to use the VLOOKUP function, you need a reference data set, which is a data set that you'll be looking into, and then a main data set, which is where you'll be transferring the information to. And one of the things that you need to note about the main data set and the reference data set is that there should be a common field between the main data set and the reference data set, or common fields. So in this case, the reason why you're able to transfer information from the reference data set to the main data set is because the name field is common to both the main data set and the reference data set. If you wanted to transfer, say, the region based on the city or town name, then the city or town name in your main data set is also common with your reference data set. And this is one of the key things to note anytime you're about to use a lookup function. You need to make sure that there's a common field between your main data set and your reference data set. So now let's proceed to look at how to write the VLOOKUP function. The syntax is shown below. So the first thing that VLOOKUP needs is a lookup value. Now think of the lookup value as the thing that you're looking for information about. So in this case, because I'm looking for information about George, George will become the lookup value. If I was looking for information about the city or town, then Kumasi will be the lookup value. So that is the lookup value. And the next thing that the formula needs is the comma. Always remember to introduce your comma when you're writing formulas. Then after introducing the comma, the next thing that the formula needs is the table array. So think of the table array as this. Which data sets can I go and refer to be able to find information about my lookup value? So in this case, your data set will be this data set. Now there are two important things to note about the lookup array. The first thing to note is that the lookup array should always begin with the column that is common to the lookup value in your main data set and your reference data set. So in this case, because we are looking for information about George, which is our lookup value, the table array should always begin from the name column, because that is the column that is common to the lookup value in the main data set and then your reference data set. If our lookup value was Kumasi because you wanted to find the region of Kumasi, then the common value that is in our reference data set that we can use to find information about lookup value would have been the city and town column. And so our table array would have begun from the city and town column, because the table array always has to begin from the column that is common to the lookup value and the reference data set. Now the next thing about the table array is once you've decided on where your table array is going to begin, you can only move in the right direction. You cannot start your table array from here and then move to the left direction. You always start from the common column and then you move in the right direction. So in this case, a table array will start from the name column and then cover up to the region. If you had more data in the columns, you could have extended a table array to those data sets. So it's not limited to just say 5 columns or 10 columns. It can stretch as far as you want it to stretch. So those are the two main rules when it comes to the table array. Now the next thing that we need to do is to introduce the comma. And once we are done with that, what we need to supply now is the column index number. So think of the column index number this way. You've selected your table array. However, which column do you want to return its information for your lookup value? In this case, because we want the region column, our column index number will have to be the number for the region column. And as a rule of thumb, where your table array begins is position 1, the next column is position 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5. So to Excel, the column index number is number 5 because the region is what we want returned for our lookup value. So return the number 5, which is the column index. So always remember that the column index is a number. So now let's move on to the next thing, which is to introduce the comma. And for the range lookup, Excel gives you two options, an approximate match or an exact match. And for these two options, you always choose the exact match. I don't recall the last time I used approximate match. Almost 99.9999% of the time, you'll be using an exact match. So once you input your exact match, you end the formula and you hit your enter key, and Excel will be able to return the results. Now with this in mind, let's write the Vlookup function to be able to return the region for George. So we start with our equal to, and then we type Vlookup. Again, when the IntelliSense gives you options, and you want to select that option, use the tab key, and it writes a function and opens the brackets for you. So now for the lookup value, remember the lookup value is the thing that you need information about, which is George. So we select George, and then the next thing is the comma. And then the lookup arrays, which data set can I go and refer to find information about George? In this instance, my lookup array is here. And as a rule of thumb, the lookup array should always begin with the column that is common to the lookup value and the reference data set. So we begin the column with the name column, and then we stretch the lookup array up onto the region column. And once we are done with that, let's introduce the look for the range. If you are not familiar with locking cells, I have a video on cell locking. It is very comprehensive and will help you appreciate how cell locking works. So let's proceed. So let's lock the range. And once we lock the range, the next thing that we introduce is a comma. And then Excel is asking for the column index number. Remember, we want to return the region. And in our reference data set, the region corresponds to the fifth column because the table array begins with column 1. This is column 2, 3, 4, and 5. So input 5, and then the next thing is the comma. And then for the range lookup between the true and false, remember we go with false because we want an exact match. So we choose the exact match, and then we close brackets and hit enter. Now once we are done with that, we can see that Excel has returned Ashanti region for George. So we've been able to look up George's region using the Vlookup function. Now if we drag this down, we'll be able to find the region for Mami as well. Let's move on to write a Vlookup function to be able to bring the age for George. Again, start with our equal to, we enter our Vlookup, and then the lookup value is George because we are looking for information about George, which is George's age. So once we select the lookup value, introduce the comma, and then the next thing is the table array. Where can we find information about George's age? Which data set can we go and look into? And this is the data set we can go and look into. Again, the first column is the common column between your lookup value, your main data, and your reference value. So once you select your table array, we introduce the lock. So we lock the table array. And the next thing is the comma. Now Excel is asking for which column we should return. And again, we want the age column. Which position is the age column? Remember, the first column is position 1. The age column is position 2. So we input the number 2. And then we introduce the comma symbol. And then for a true or a false, which is an approximate or exact match, we go with false, an exact match. So once we select the false, we hit the tab key, and then we close brackets, hit enter. And with that, we've been able to return the age for George. So now if you drag this down, we've also returned the age for Mami. If you come and check Mami, her age is 23, and George's age is 20. Now let's write a final Vlookup to return the scorecard for George and Mami. And for that, again, we introduce our equal to symbol, and then we type Vlookup. We hit the tab key for Excel to write the function and open the bracket. Again, our lookup value is the thing that we are looking for information about, which is George. Then once we are done with that, we hit the comma. Our table arrays, which table can we go and refer to find information about George? And again, as a rule of thumb, the first column in your table array should correspond to the lookup value. So in this case, our table array begins from the name column and then we drag to the right side, because the second rule of the table array is that you can only drag to the right side. So once we are done with that, we lock the cells. So once we are done with that, we introduce the comma. And now for the column index, the number that represents the column index here is 1, 2, this is 3. So introduce the number 3, and then we introduce the comma again. And again, we select exact match. And once we do that, we close the bracket and hit enter. And we've been able to pull the scorecard for George. So let's drag this down. We're also able to pull the scorecard for Mami. So with that, we've been able to understand why we need VLOOKUP, the syntax and the rules behind how VLOOKUP works. So now we can move on to practicing more examples. So for our first example, we have employee IDs. We need to be able to write a VLOOKUP function to return the department, the city, the country, the name of the employee, and the salary. And the way I've designed this example is to intentionally put the reference data set on a different sheet. In the real world scenario, your reference data is usually not in the same sheet as your lookup data. And so I've intentionally separated the two so that you can have an experience of writing a lookup function referencing different sheets. So now, how do we achieve this using VLOOKUP? So we come back to our practice sheet, and the first thing we need to do is to input our VLOOKUP. So once we input the VLOOKUP, remember the lookup value is the thing that you are looking for information about. In this case, you are looking for information about this employee. So this employee becomes our lookup value, and then input in the comma. And the next thing is the table array, which is in the practice reference sheet. So we come to this sheet, and remember the table array always begins with the column that is common to the lookup value in your main data sheet. So we start the table array from here, and then we drag to the right side. And remember, you always have to drag to the right side with your table array. So once we do that, we lock the range. We highlight the range, introduce the F4. So we've locked the range. Then the next thing is the comma, and then Excel is asking us for a column index. So let's go back to our practice reference sheets and try and find out which index belongs to the department. So in this case, it is 1, 2, 3. So 3 is the index that corresponds to the department. So we come up here, we take this off, and remember, we just need a single value. So this is 3, and then we introduce the comma. And now when Excel is asking us for an approximate or exact match, we go with the exact match, and then we close bracket and hit enter. And with that, we've been able to pull the employee's department. So now let's validate this. So we come back to our reference data, and then we look for that employee. I think the employee ID is 11. So we come and look for 11. And 11 corresponds to administration. So we come here and we check, and yes, we've been able to pull the employee's department. So once we are done with that, we can drag down and put the departments of other employees. I like to generally validate the first entry and the last entry. So let's look for the department for employee 7. We come back to our practice reference, and then for 7, that is operations. So yes, we've been able to pull the department for our employees. And with that, we can move to the city. So for the city too, the same thing. We enter equal to VLOOKUP. We open our bracket, our lookup value is employee ID, we hit the comma. For the table array, we come back to our reference sheet and we select the range. And once we select the range, we lock the range, introduce our F4 key, and then after locking the range, we introduce the comma. The column index for the city is number 4. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 4. So you realize that when you move between sheets, Excel tries to reference the sheet. So let's take this off and then supply the number 4. Then introduce the comma, and then for the range, we introduce exact match. We close brackets and hit enter. And with that, we've been able to supply the city as well. So now let's drag down. Then once we drag down, let's go and validate. And for employee 11, the city is Paris. So we come to our reference data, and then for the employee 11, the city is Paris. For the last employee, which is 7, the city is Toronto. We come to our practice, we check for employee 7, the city is Toronto. So we've been able to successfully write the VLOOKUP for the city as well. Now let's move on and write the VLOOKUP for the country. Now when it comes to the VLOOKUP for the country, let's go back to our practice reference and let me show you something. You realize that in your first reference data set, there is no column for country. However, in your second reference data set, you can see that the country is there. You can also see that the city column is there. And now when you come to your practice data set, we already have a city column. So that means we can look up the country based on the city for the employee. And in this case, the city rather becomes the lookup value and not the employee. So now let's write a lookup value to pull the country based on the city. So in this case, we start with our VLOOKUP, and then the lookup value is Paris. So once we enter our lookup value, we hit the comma key, and then we go to our practice reference sheets. And this time we select this entire table. And then once we do that, again, we come and introduce the lock. And then after introducing the lock, put in the comma, and then we come and check for the country corresponds to column 2. So this is 1, 2. Again, let's take off this reference here. Remember, we just need a single value. So we input 2, and then the next thing is the comma. And for the range lookup, we choose an exact match. And then we close the brackets and hit enter. So once you are done with that, we're able to pull the country for the city. So let's drag down, and then let's validate. Paris is in France. We come here to check, and yes, Paris is France. And then for the last one, Toronto is in Canada. So we come and check Toronto, Canada. So yes, our lookup function is working. I'll leave the name and salary for you guys to practice. See if you can pull the name and salary using the VLOOKUP function. So with that, we are done with the first example. Let's move on to the second example. So for the second example, we need to find the city of the employee. And now if you take a look at the names of the employees, we have duplicate names. However, they belong to different departments. So although the employees share the same name, these are two different people. And the duplicate names are Eke Siedu and Aaron Wise. So there's an Aaron Wise in the sales department, and there's an Aaron Wise in the finance department. And there's an Ikea in the finance department and an Ikea in the engineering department. How do you write a lookup function to be able to know that the city that we are calling out is for the Aaron Wise in the sales department? And if you come and look at your practice reference sheet, you realize that the Aaron Wise in the sales department is from Sydney. However, the Aaron Wise from the finance department is from Dubai. So how do we tackle this? So what we need to do is to be able to find a unique column between the reference data set and then the main data set. And to be able to do this, we need to generate an ID field, which will be unique for our main data set, and generate the same ID field that will be unique for our reference data set. Now, what we can use to generate the ID is by combining the name and the department. If we combine the name and the department, we can have a unique ID that will be different from combining this name and department. And so now when we do the lookup, we'll be able to then pull the right city for the right employee. So now let's begin. So the first thing we need to do is to come here and then introduce an ID field. So let's call this ID field. And the way we are going to join the name and department is with an Excel function called the concatenate. And what concatenate does is that it's able to join two strings together. Think of strings in Excel like text. So things that you cannot add. For instance, you can add 2 plus 5 to give you 7, which is a number. However, you can't add A1 and sales. You can only just combine them. So the way to combine two strings or text is to use the concatenate function. And to do that, you start with your equal to concat. And once you put concat, Excel gives you two options. So you have concatenate and concat. They do virtually the same thing. So let's go with the concat. And then the first text we choose is Aaron Wise. We introduce a comma. And then the next text we choose is the sales department. And then we close the brackets and hit enter. So as you can see, we've generated a unique ID field for the employee. And now we can drag this down. So once we drag this down, you can see that we've created a unique ID field for each of the employees sharing the same name. Now let's go to our reference data set and generate a unique ID field for that as well. So we come to the reference data set. So let's introduce a column between B and C. And to do that, we highlight the column and we hit the Ctrl+Shift+ to create a new column. And now let's call this column the ID column and hit enter. Now to generate the ID, we repeat the same process, which is to concatenate the name and the department. So we do that by equal to concat the name, which is B4, we introduce a comma, and then we select the department, we close brackets and hit enter. So once we are done with that, we've been able to generate a unique ID too for the reference data that we can drag down. So now we've generated a unique ID field in both our practice data and then our reference data. So now we have everything that we need to be able to now write the Vlookup function. So let's go back to our practice data and write the Vlookup function. So now, in order to pull the city, we start with our Vlookup function equal to Vlookup. And then the lookup value this time around becomes the unique ID field we created. Remember, the lookup value is the thing that you're looking for, its information. So you're looking for information about this unique ID. And then the next thing is our comma. And for the table array, we come back to our practice reference. And then we start selection from the ID column. Remember, the ID column is the common field between your reference data and your table array. And then we drag to the right hand side for the table array. And once we are done with that, we introduce our lock. And then for the next parameter, we come and check in our reference data what the column ID is. So another thing you can do is you can come and check what the reference ID is before so that you don't shuffle between sheets all the time. Because anytime you shuffle between a sheet, you see that Excel has referenced that sheet that I'm on this sheet. So Excel thinks I'm about to reference a cell in the sheet. However, I'm just coming to introduce a number for the column index. So I need to take off this reference. And for the city, remember the table array begins from the column ID. And so the column ID here will be position 1, department is position 2, and then city is position 3. And since we need the city, we go with 3. And then we introduce our comma. And then for the range lookup, we select false exact match. So once we do that, we close our brackets and hit enter. And just like that, we've been able to look up the city for this unique ID field. So now let's drag down to see if this works. And just like that, we've been able to do a lookup for all the ID fields for each of the unique employees. Now, once we are done with that, we do our usual validation. So we come and look for Aaron Y sales in our practice reference. So Aaron Y sales is in Sydney. AKC Edu Finance is in Kumasi. So let's just validate that. AKC Edu Finance Kumasi. And then for the last one, AKC Edu Engineering Toronto. So let's check for that as well. AKC Edu Engineering Toronto. So now what we've done this time around is that we had a problem where we needed to look up the city of employees with duplicate names. And because the duplicate names were different people belonging to different departments, in order to do the lookup, we needed to find a unique ID field in our main data set and then replicate that unique ID field also in our reference data set. Now, once we're able to establish a unique ID field between our main data set and our reference data set, then we can proceed to do our VLOOKUP function. So with that, let's move on to the limitations of VLOOKUP. So now the main limitation when it comes to VLOOKUP is the fact that the lookup table array always moves towards the right hand side. So for instance, in this example, we need the name of this employee. If you look in our reference data set, the name of the employee is before the employee ID. The city as well is before the employee ID. And the department is also before the employee ID. And so when you're writing your VLOOKUP function for something like this, for instance, if you start writing your VLOOKUP function and your lookup value, select your lookup value, comma, for your table array, Excel is unable to highlight the table array this way. It will not work. So if you try highlighting the table array to the left-hand side, say we try this, and then for the column index, and then for the column index, maybe you will think that, okay, since this is 1, this will be 2. And then for the range lookup, we choose exact match and close brackets. And hit enter, see that the formula is not working because we've broken one of the rules of VLOOKUP, which is where your table array begins, you can only move to the right hand side. But in this case, when we began here, we tried moving to the left hand side. And doing something like this with VLOOKUP cannot work. So how do we get around this problem? So now what we need to do is we need to find a way to bring this employee ID in our table array to the first position and then use that new column as a beginning point for our table array and then drag right. And the way to do this is you can come to column A and create a new column using your Ctrl+Shift+. And once you do that, you can now come and call here new employee ID. And you can open the column a bit. Okay, so now for our new employee ID, all we do is we reference the existing employee ID and we hit enter. And then once we do that, we can now drag down the formula to replicate the employee ID in the first column. Now we have what we need to be able to do the VLOOKUP, which is our table array beginning at this side and then dragging to the right hand side. So now let's write a VLOOKUP function to be able to pull the name of the employee, the department, and the city. And for this lookup function, I also want to introduce something very easy that you can also adapt. Now, if you look at the name of the employee using your table array, you realize that this is position 1, This is position 2, the city. Department is 3, and then the name is 4. So up here for the column array, we can introduce 4 here. For the city, we know is position 1, 2. So the city will become 2. And then for the department, that will be 1, 2, 3. So now for the position here will be 3. So now that we've tagged the positions for our column index, we can write one function, and then based on our knowledge of cell locking, we can drag to the right hand side and drag down. And we'll be able to find the name, city, and department for each of the employees. Again, I have a video on cell locking. If after writing this you do not understand, I recommend you watching the video on cell locking. Will really solidify your understanding of writing formulas and locking cells. Without knowledge of cell locking, you'll not be able to write a formula which will allow you to drag in any direction that you want. And so it limits you into writing the formula multiple times. So now let's write a VLOOKUP to pull the information we need. Then we start with VLOOKUP. Again, the lookup value is the thing that you're looking for, its information. So for our main data set, the thing we are looking for its information is the employee ID, and the table arrays, which table can we go and refer to find information about our lookup value. And again, as a rule of thumb, that table should be the first column that is common to both the reference data and the lookup value in the main data. So we start the table array with the new employee ID because that's the common field between your reference data and your main data. So we select our table. Remember, you start from the employee ID and then you move towards the right hand side. And once you're done with the table array, come up here to lock the table array with our F4 key. So after the table array, we introduce the comma, and then now for the column index, rather than hard coding the column index, we reference this cell. So we reference cell I3, which is number 4. And because we'll be dragging towards the right hand side, we'll be locking the row number 3. And once we lock the row number 3, introduce the comma, and for the range lookup, we select false. And then we close our brackets, and then hit enter. Now after writing our formula, we just need to check to see if we've locked the right cells. And so we come with our lookup value. If we drag to the right hand side, we do not want the column to move from H to I. So we come here and we lock the column H. And for the 5, we want it to move down to 6 when we drag down. So I think everything is fine. We've locked the cells that we need to lock. So now we can hit enter. And then let's drag to the right hand side and down. We drag to the right hand side and we drag down. So as usual, once you're done with your lookup function, you need to validate. So for employee 09, come and look for employee 09. The name is Sergio Knight. The city is New York. And then the department is legal. And for employee 13, the name is Edu. The city is Toronto. And the department is engineering. And with that, we've been able to overcome the limitation of VLOOKUP, which was your ID column in your reference dataset coming after the information that you needed. And in order to solve that, what we did is that we came to create our new ID set before the information that we needed and reference the existing ID set. So once we're able to do that, we're able to now write our VLOOKUP function with a table array spanning all of the columns that we needed included. So with that, let's move on to the next thing, which is why your VLOOKUP function may not be working. So now let's look at instances where you've written your VLOOKUP function, but it's not working. So let's write a VLOOKUP function to be able to pull the department of these employees. We start with our VLOOKUP, and then we select our lookup value, introduce the comma, we select our lookup array, introduce the comma for our column index for the department, that's number 3, and then for the match value, we choose exact match and close bracket. Now you can see that for the first instance for employee 1, we've been able to get the sales. And when we check for employee 1, we can see that employee 1 belongs to the sales department. So that's working. However, let's drag down and let's see the results we'll get for the rest. So when we drag down, you realize that for employee 11 as well, we've also gotten the administration, which is correct. And now when we come to employee 2, the lookup function is telling us NA, not available. However, we can see that employee 2 is within our reference data set. So usually when you see NA, it typically means that the lookup value is unable to find what you are looking for. However, if you look in our reference data set, we can clearly see that employee 2 is there. So anytime I run into issues like this, what I like to do is to first debug step by step. And the first thing I do is to come to the first instance of my lookup function, and then I come into the formula bar to see if I've picked the right columns. As you can see, for the first instance, everything looks fine. Then I come to my second instance and then look in the formula bar. And now I've seen something interesting. In the first instance, my table array began from row 11. However, in the second instance, I've seen that my table array has gone down one step. Now let me hit escape to come out of the formula bar and come to the third instance and look in the formula bar. Also see in the third instance, the table array has gone down another one step. And because of that, employee 2 in my reference data is out of the range of my selected table array. Now what this means is that as I was dragging down, my table array was also moving down with me, which is a problem of locking cells. It means I didn't lock my table array. So one of the first things that can affect your VLOOKUP formula is not locking the right cells as far as the table array is concerned. So let's go back up to the first instance and now lock our table array. So we come into the formula bar and then we lock the table array and hit enter. And after doing that, let's drag down and see the results we get. So after dragging down, you can see that for employee 2, we've now been able to get the right department, which is finance. And we can see that our table array is locked and it's not moving. Even at the last employee, it's not moving. However, for employee 7 and the last employee, we are still not finding the department for these two employees. And when we look in our reference data set, we can see that employee 7 is for HR, and for employee 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that is marketing. So another thing I do to troubleshoot after I've realized that my lookup function has been written well is to check my lookup value. Sometimes on a surface level, it looks like the lookup value here is the same lookup value you are seeing in your reference data set. So in order to confirm if it's the same thing, I like to do a sense check. And what I do is usually to ask Excel a question, which is equal to my lookup value equal to my reference value. So basically what you're asking Excel is to check if the lookup value you're seeing here is the same value as the reference data. So this question means, is this equal to this? And if they are the same, Excel should return true. So once I do this, Excel is saying false, meaning although they look like they are the same thing, they are not the same. So the next thing I do is to come into the lookup value in my main data set, and then I come to the formula bar. And as you can see, although I have the employee ID here, there are still some characters here, which is white space. So now when I take off the white space and hit enter, you realize that now this has become true and the lookup function is working. So sometimes what might be making your lookup function not work is the fact that although in appearance, the values might look the same as your main data and the reference data, sometimes there may be spaces in the characters, and so those spaces need to be taken off. And another thing that we've also learned is that in order to make sure that they are the same value, you can introduce the equal to trick that I just showed you to check if the value you see in your main data set is equal to the value in your reference data set. So with that, we've been able to fix the second issue. Now for the third issue, let's apply the same method that we did for the second issue, which is we come back to our question formula, and then this time we check if this value is equal to this value. Hit enter. And as you can see, it's false. That means this value is not equal to this value. And usually you see this play out, especially when you are dealing with numbers. Although the two values look like numbers, they may not be numbers. And Excel has a function that allows us to check if a number is truly a number. And that function is called the type function. So the type function will return 1 if it's a number and 2 if it's a text. So let's check the type for this number and hit enter. We get 1, meaning this is a number. Let's do the same type function for this number as well. Close bracket, hit enter. We get 2, meaning the second one is a text and the first one is a number. And because of that, although they look the same, they are not the same type of data. One is a number and one is a text. And usually if you have a number showing up as a text, Excel flags it with this green symbol at the top. And now when I come and click on this, Excel is asking me to convert to a number. So now when I convert to a number, you can see that this has changed to true now, and now the type is showing as 1. And also the lookup function is now working because now Excel has been able to confirm that this number is now equal to this number. So this is the third thing that may be affecting your lookup function. And so with that, let's move on to a bonus example. Okay, so for now, the bonus example, I'm giving you two examples. We need the various sales numbers for February and April for the regions here. That's your first example. And for the second example, we have coordinates for a location. We need a location name using the reference data set that we have here. So if you look at your reference data set, it has combined the longitude and latitude and it has given you a location name. So how do you get a location name using this reference data set? So I'll leave that to you to try and solve. You can pause the video here, try your hands at it, and see if you can solve these two examples. For those of you who just joined to learn, you can follow me as I solve the example. So now let's proceed. So before we start with our VLOOKUP, let's just indicate the column references that we'll be pulling. So February will be 1, 2, 3, and then April will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. So now having our column index set, let's write our VLOOKUP function. It is VLOOKUP, select our lookup value, comma, we select a table array, comma, and then for the column index, we select this reference, and then for the match value, we choose exact match and close brackets. And once you're done with that, let's come and lock the cells that we need to lock. So for the lookup value, we lock the column. For the table array, we lock the range. And then for the column index number, we lock the row number and hit enter. So once you're done with our lookup function, we drag to the right and then we drag down. And now let's validate our results. So Accra is 2291 for February, and for April it's 3174. For Western is 3393 for February, and for April it's 2071. So we are done with the first example. So now for the second example, if you take a look at the reference data set, you see that the reference data set's ID is combining the longitude and the latitude. However, in our main data set, this has been separated. So we need to normalize or standardize the two data sets so that we can now apply our VLOOKUP function. And to standardize that, let's combine the long and lat in our main data set with the concat function. So we open our concat function, select the long, we select the lat, close bracket, hit enter, and then we apply this down. Now we can also check to see if the ID here is equal to the ID here. And once we do that check, we get true, meaning they're the same. So now we can write our VLOOKUP function, which is equal to VLOOKUP. We select our lookup value with the comma key. We select our table array with the comma key. And for the column index, that will be index number 2. For the location name, introduce the comma, and we want an exact match. So we close bracket and hit enter. So the first one, let's open this column. We've been able to find the location name, which is Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park, and then we drag down to the rest. We've been able to find that for the other ones as well, for the Sydney Opera and Times Square. So if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and share with anyone you think will need this VLOOKUP knowledge. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.